this is the third expression, sorry, the fourth expression of Taurus, called awakening. And the 5 degrees of the expression are these. 16 is an old man vainly attempting to reveal the mysteries. 17, a battle between swords and torches. 18, a woman holding a bag out of a window. 19, a newly formed continent. And 20, wind, clouds, and haste, which also happens to be my Mars. Does anybody have any planets in any of those positions?
I don't know. I'm trying to. I have a north node in Taurus. Does north node matter, or is it only planets that matter?
North node, what degree is it?
I can't get my, okay, there it goes. Couldn't get my computer to let me get to that. I don't have mine memorized.
'26th degree.
Okay.
Your north node. So that's not it. Nobody else with a degree in that batch? Okay, so if we look at the earlier expressions of Taurus, we begin with power, 1 to 5. Then effectiveness, 6 to 10, and application, 11 to 15. So let's just look at those 3 first briefly. Power, effectiveness, and application. Can you see Taurus there?
Power, effective.
I think when you look at a bull in a field, it's a really good sense of Taurus. You know, it's powerful, isn't it?
Yes.
You don't mess with it. It's a bull. You know, we haven't got anything else like that in our country. We don't have lions and tigers, and the bull is pretty much the most impressive animal we'd ever see in England.
I was going to say one of the things with power effectiveness, bulls, they don't spend as much time sort of roaming around as cows, you could say, when they're sort of, well, cows also, but they spend a lot of time sort of just surveying the scene. And it's almost like they don't like to spend so much energy. I mean, particularly when they're lying down, they'll just sort of be lying there and just looking around, and it's almost like they know quite a lot just without having to get up and wander. And so there's this thing of sort of like an effective use of energy, you could say, that bulls and cows have, you know. And then, like what you say, they'll only charge if they need to. They're not sort of running around, you know, sort of like horses do sometimes, you know, sort of jumping and kicking and things like that. They have a very sort of effective, and also their use of the horns sort of being at the front, then they have a sort of a fairly good direction for when they want to use their energy as well, I guess.
Yeah, they are undoubtedly powerful, and they don't really have to do anything about that. As you say, they have the potential, which is enough, you know. And I think that's true about Taurus people, and significantly Taurus people. They kind of don't seem to be working awfully hard. They kind of quietly plod through their work and get the job done. They are, you know, solid, really. And you know, the third expression of that first half, application, they tend to know what they're doing as well, Taurus. You know, they apply themselves to the matter in hand, very kind of physical and down to earth. All of which I find present within me. But this fourth expression, awakening, is where we start with the 16th degree, which is where my sun is. An old man attempting vainly to reveal the mysteries. Have you, any of you come across that and studied that particular one?
I was just listening to your group that you just recently did, where you guys talked about that. You and I forget the other lady, Sharon.
Sharon, Elizabeth, and Richard were the other members. Yeah, that was.
And you and Sharon had that similar one. I thought it was really interesting to hear that Sabian, an old man vainly attempting to reveal the mysteries, as you. It's so you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've grown into it. I didn't really identify it as a young man, but even though I have no way of feeling this at the moment, I am understood to be in the later years of my life now. I don't feel it, and I am trying to reveal the mysteries, of course. I think the issue here is to try to do it in vain, you know, not to be able to succeed in it. And Mark Edmund Jones was quite on the point here. He said that this is one of the very, very few negative degrees in the whole zodiac. And on the face of it, it looks like that somebody's actually trying to do something and not getting it done. But I think Dane Rudhyar's take on it was much more hopeful for me. That actually it is in trying to explain yourself in different ways. You wouldn't do that. I mean, especially Taurus wouldn't do that if it was going to work first time, then they wouldn't try harder to do it in a different way. So what I've had to do is to learn lots of stuff and try to teach lots of different stuff, to get my point across, to get my opinion heard. And that has actually been quite a motivation for me to do more, to learn more, to study more.
Do you think Joe Miller's teaching that it can't be taught, but it can be caught might apply as well, that you have to have the apt student in order for that knowledge to be received?
Yeah, I think let's just explain that idea. Knowledge cannot be taught, it must be caught. You know, in other words, you have to almost like pick it up like an illness, is that sense of being caught, not like a ball.
Like a kindling, in somebody, like a light to light kind of.
Yeah, like a fire catches as well. But I think the whole idea is that the other part of that is that teaching is a two-way process, that the teacher can't just shove it down somebody's mouth. You know, they have to want the appetite to swallow it. And not very many people actually are that interested in the mysteries. Not really. We're rather a sort of a small group of people who study the mysteries. And I would love the world at large to understand something of the mysteries, and they never will. So in that sense, anyone teaching the mysteries is bound to be teaching it in vain, because most people won't find it interesting. It doesn't give them any money or all of the other things that they want.
James, could I say something? The in vain part and vainly, I was interpreting vainly differently than in vain.
Your interpretation is that there's a sense of arrogance in there, is it?
And yes, and what you were saying just a second ago about, I don't remember how you said it, but what I was thinking was the teacher also has to be able to learn and teach simultaneously. So the teacher learns from the students as well as he teaches the students. And there was something in that conversation you had this morning about that, where you said it doesn't happen very often, but, you know, you're making me stop and rethink a little bit, you know, kind of. That's just how I was thinking of that.
There's two parts to that. I mean, first of all, is it really likely that Jones was wanting one of the Sabian symbols to promote the idea of arrogance? It doesn't seem likely. I think the word vainly here means in vain. I've heard somebody else with that understanding. She used it as an accusation against me, which is partly implied in what you're saying.
I'm not trying to be like derogatory toward you. I think we all have some.
Well, then we must go with the in vain interpretation, because otherwise it would be derogatory. And I rather assume that Jones would not be derogatory to a portion of his population. I don't know anybody else with Taurus 16. I would quite like to meet somebody to find out what their interpretation is. I think it means in vain, really.
I've got a moon. My moon's in Taurus 15, but that's my moon. My sun.
And it's in 15.
But yeah, it's interesting, you know, like this thing of, I guess when you look at sort of like what happens, I guess, with world consciousness, like you were saying, there are not that many people interested in the mysteries. There have always been, but then the numbers fluctuate. And I don't know, I think that there is an increase in people who in some way coming in contact with the mysteries and trying to find out more now. So it can be teaching in vain or trying in vain to a certain, getting to a certain point, and then just being able to do something, and then maybe having to be satisfied with a little bit more. I mean, I'm quite honestly, I'm pleased that you still got your you're welcoming people to come and participate, you know, because I could imagine that you could sort of you can be happy by, you could say, by yourself, but then the necessity or the feeling of being able to share and wanting to share is something that it's not easy to keep alive.
It's not possible to be a teacher without a student body, is it? You know, I want to be a teacher, and the reason I want to be a teacher is that's the only way I will ever learn. The process that it may not be that I'm learning very much by what is said to me, but I'm learning a huge amount by trying to present the information in a way that can be heard. You know, I've gone through a process of sitting at the feet of teachers all of my life and listening, and now I'm actually trying to pass that on. But what the first thing you said was that there's a large number of people opening up to study the material now, and this is obviously because of the numbers on internet that were not present 20 years ago. But the people that are opening up to do that are generally subject to the process of being led by those who don't really understand what they're doing. That's much more of a danger today than it was earlier, because it took a lot to come to understand the language of astrology and mysticism and esotericism. You had to read books and go to groups and all of that. Now you just have to go online. So there's a lot of people just passing on what they've heard online. And it's like referring to what Adya said, they're not catching it, they're not getting it, they're not grounding it. They're learning the intellectual way of promoting the words without actually bringing it into the system, into the body. And so actually, even with quite a lot of students of the mysteries, they're not willing to change who they are in order to embrace the mysteries. So that's a frustration sometimes.
Could I share something about Venus and vanity? And I have a lot of Venus in my chart, so I've done a lot of thinking. I'm always very drawn to aesthetics and beauty, and a lot of what I offer has to do with bringing beauty into the world in a lot of different aspects. And then being in a female body, we have that whole kettle of fish. But I find that that yes, there is a danger of vanity in the Venus energy, but the mature aspect of it is more like Rumi talks about, the 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. You know, let the beauty we love be what we do. To me, that's very Venusian. That if I'm flower arranging, or I'm storytelling, or I'm working in clay, all of that is a kind of prayer in that Venus desire to bestow the vision of beauty, or and it does require a gaze. That's where, if for any communication to happen, you want others to, you know, have a participation in what you're offering.
Sure.
But I would say what you've offered, James, there's a lot of beauty in it. The way you have put everything together, I see a lot of that kind of, and of course, you know, it's very appealing to me, but I don't see a lot of the vanity aspect of it.
I think the word, thank you. I think the word vanity is if you try and look at, lots of words seem to be different until you actually get to the truthful depth of them. And here we have the idea that somebody who's behaving with a certain self-importance or self-love, they actually don't get the job done. And so they're acting in vain. I think that the two meanings of the word align at that point. And one of the ways in which to promote ideas, new ideas, is to include beauty. People respond well, for example, to the pictures on my website that Ruby Fumiski has drawn. And without those pictures, my whole site would be a different experience, wouldn't it? You know, so the beauty that she's introduced into the topic is actually softened the way, oiled the process of people wanting to read it. And I think I've also learned to lay out the formatting as well differently. I went to study building a website at some point, and I already had a website, and the web designer said the website I had was so ugly, you know, he didn't say exactly those terms, but I just presented the whole material, you know, and then the idea of putting it into smaller paragraphs with big spaces in between them, pictures now and again, titles, different colors, you know, all of these softer skills of formatting, that actually made the difference. That made all the difference. And then people would read the material. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an example of what I've done. I've just like said, look, this is what I think, and that doesn't work. So I've had to kind of change the formatting and the inclusion of greater sort of investment in beauty. And I think that's how all of us learn. We find that what we're trying to do doesn't work, and we have to change it.
Well, that can be seen as a vain attempt, you know. I mean, just sort of like, yeah, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Just sort of like one after the other. I mean, it doesn't come for free, you know. Sort of the energy that you do, just sort of having to redo and just reorganize.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Yeah. No, I mean, indeed. I mean, and actually, the thing is that I'm not even now getting my point across. You know, I don't think that anybody's ever going to get me the way I see myself, and that's what I'm trying to teach. It's just not possible, you know, because it's only me that has this particularly odd way of seeing things, you know. I think it's true for us all. We can't really fully express ourselves to the satisfaction that we want. Nobody's ever going to understand you the way you understand yourself. Okay, so let's move on to the second, Taurus 17. Hi, Loic. Welcome.
Hey, hello, hi everyone.
The 17th degree of Taurus, a battle between the swords and the torches. Dealing with inner confrontations, confronting inner dualities. We must learn to discern between what ennobles us and what betrays spirit. So the swords and the torches represent two motivations within us. The sword represents like taking on life, doing what's necessary, struggling against opposition, whereas the torches represent sort of what we have a torch for, what we hold a torch for. It's more the inner sense of what we want to do rather than what we have to do. That's how
I think of the tarot, you know, the swords
Yeah,
as being
indeed.
very mental and the flames as very passionate.
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm. It must be the tarot, mustn't it? You know, it doesn't make a lot of sense otherwise. But the swords, you work it out with your mind, and you know, have different ideas. But the torches are the passionate feelings that you've got, and this is very often different within a person, isn't it?
Mm.
You know, I know somebody who is the sun in Taurus 17, and we have conversations all the time about this question. He's living this out fully.
Well, yeah, the torches are also, they're used for making things clear, you know, that they're held up, and normally they're taken by someone who's leading the way, lighting the way for other people to come, and just sort of yeah, so it sort of has the idea of sharing light, or bringing light so others can see, or so that things can be seen.
Well, both images are quite strong. The torch, as you say, is lighting the way. The sword is associated with Michael, sword of St. Michael, and cutting through. And the hero is very often the one with the sword, King Arthur and Excalibur, and so on. And you've got two ways of leading people, haven't you? You know, the sword and the torch. One is by passionate oratory. Follow me, this is the light of the way, and the other is the sword. You know, we need to cut our enemy down. Quite different, really, aren't they? But they're within us both of these, aren't they?
Well, it talks about, like with the two of them, it talks about being prepared. If you need to, you've got the sword. But
well, it would be, except for the first word, battle between the swords and the torches. There's definitely a hint of contrast going on there.
Yes.
Is it like the ego versus the higher self? Like the sword being the ego and the torch being the higher level?
I can see how that could be made to fit. I don't think that was implied in my interpretation. I think they're equal aspects of ourselves, different motivations within us, on the level of self, the level of ego. The torch is more the thinking self, and the torch more the feeling self. Sort of a feminine, masculine kind of polarity.
I'm sorry, you said the torch is the thinking self? Is that what you said?
No, the sword is the thinking self.
Okay. And the torch is, what did you use? Word?
Feeling.
Healing.
Yeah, the torch is a fire, isn't it? It's passion.
Now, like the heart with the flames, that's a real common symbol for the heart energy with the fire. Of course, you can get a fire in the head too.
Yes, you can. Okay, so can we see any contrast between the first and the second? The revelation of the mysteries by this old man on the one hand, and the battle between the swords and the torches in the other.
Mm.
The second is meant to contrast the first, isn't it?
Yeah, the first almost feels like there's an inner resignation, and then the second one is that kind of unquenchable duality within that's going to keep things stirred up and keep that energy moving.
I think there's certainly a difference between, the second one does imply dynamism, constant kind of friction and keeping things moving, whereas the first seems to be, this guy's sorted it all out, now he wants to say what he knows, and the second one say, oh, no, you haven't worked it out yet, you know, there's more to do. So I can see that contrast.
Yeah, well, you could also, in that sense, the swords could be sort of like, you could say, can be an inner battle, if you're sort of, if the old man is vainly trying to share, to teach, but like coming back on what sort of emotions can come when you are vainly trying. Then there's things that you have to deal with, you'll have to cut away, or you can bring light to them. There's this battle between what do I get rid of, what do I cut out, do I just, like it could be total frustration, or I can bring light to it and just sort of say, okay, well, maybe there's the path is this way, I don't need to cut out. I can, again, being Taurus, it sort of can be, I can just leave that beside me. I don't need to cut it out. I can follow the torch, it can be, I don't know. That's sort of what.
No, I think that's very good. The in the first case, there's evidence that something's not quite working right, and in the second case, it's, well, look within. If there's anything wrong out there, the problem must be within, and you're not quite getting this swords and torches balance worked out properly. So yeah, that's exactly right, I would say.
I'm also getting this kind of, with the two energies combined, this sort of archetype. I guess we would, in terms of story, we would think of Yoda. There's a little bit of a combative resistance to allowing in the student, maybe sometimes, because you're protecting this, torches, the mob takes the torch out to the monster, and the hero takes the sword. So there's a defense of the sacred territory, maybe sometimes. I know you and I had a conversation about that. Not everyone can come into this group. And it took me a while that's a mature kind of discernment around spiritual practice. And it takes maturity to maybe arrive at those, knowing when to use the sword, knowing when to use the fire.
Yeah, that's good as well, isn't it? I mean, just it's not only a battle between the swords and the torches, but it's also a choice. When do you cut away and when do you illuminate more fully? Yeah, that's a good point.
So I'm thinking, and again, I don't know if I'm stuck on thinking it the wrong way, but the sword seems like, more aggression, more yang to me. I don't know. And the torch, illuminating, more yin.
Yeah, sure.
Is that?
Yeah, I see it that way.
And the sword is more like concrete in the world, more matter, whereas the torch is more etheric, maybe fire and air. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's that clear. The definition of the elements. I mean, sword to me is the clear-cutting mind, and torch is more bringing some light, some dim light into the darkness. That's what a torch does, isn't it? You kind of just about illuminate the darkness a bit with a torch. With a sword is the nth degree. You cut through and you kill. So there is a yang and the yin side to it. Certainly, I don't know about more than that. Anyway, dealing with inner confrontations is the issue here. And then we move on to Taurus 18. A woman holding a bag out of a window. Emptying the mind, clearing the mind of unhelpful attitudes. Neither visionary intention nor mundane ability is more spiritual than the other. Thought, belief, and habit purified through meditation and open-mindedness. So does that reconcile the first two?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
It's almost so clear there's hardly anything to say about it. we ought to try and come up with some words, didn't we?
How about yay?
That's an ejaculation. It's a woman holding a bag out of a window, a woman, feminine, a bag, an open space, out of the window into the unknown, the air breathing into it. It could not be more feminine, could it? Emptying the mind. So
yeah, and it seems so like it wouldn't do anything, you know, to hold a bag in the air. It sounds like a futile act, but then we're having this, oh my gosh, this is revelatory.
I bet something gets put in the bag though, don't you?
Oh, yes.
I mean, you know, I kind of visualize these. I think of it as like a shopping bag, and she puts it out the window and somebody comes along and fills it up for her so she doesn't have to go to the supermarket. That's what went into my mind. It's silly, I know, but that's what I thought.
Well, the mind, we always run this risk of more things coming to mind, you know, but it just, if it's sort of things, they can come in and go out. It just depends on whether you're sort of filling the bag and regularly putting it in out the window, or whether you've, you know, just.
Bags do fill and empty, don't they? That's their purpose, is to fill and empty.
Yeah.
That's what a
So-
bag's for.
I'm looking at your description and it says a mind that is conditioned to make judgments about right and wrong creates a prideful ego that limits the soul's evolution. So to me, it goes back to vain as an ego. Like, to me, it keeps sounding the same as that, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's certainly in this case we're being warned against the danger of over involvement in ego, and that being a limitation for the soul's evolution. Certainly, yeah.
But then that's sort of like it's a thread that's going through, you know, like it depends on which way you're going through it, between, you know, sort of from the first one to the second, now this one, just it's a thread that's going through, but it's just there's the sensation of moving ahead, but then the things that are coming to challenge, are you prepared? You know, what are you going to do? You're going to take the sword, or you're going to take the light? You know, then you've got a bag hanging out the window. This thing of clearing the mind is not something that's sort of like, the first one isn't totally resolved. There's this process of being aware or attent, like the previous one with the torches, of this light of being clear, and then this one of just sort of like, it has to be an act. I mean, it's if you just sort of everybody knows, you know, if you just sort of go about your daily life, then your mind is the whole time putting things into the bag. There's just stuff that will be in there. If you don't have some sort of a practice or some sort of an intention that, you know, I'm just putting this stuff out, you know, I just notice it as it's there, but I just don't catch on to it. I mean, like what meditation is about is just sort of giving preference to the space rather than the stuff that is going to be coming in, you know?
Yeah, the space indeed. I think that there's a subtle understanding of the use of ego that needs to be introduced perhaps now. I think there's a freeing up implied within Taurus 18. Let's just talk around the point. Absolutely, by far, the biggest problem that I come across in my students is that they will not teach. Not that they cannot teach, but they will not teach. And that's based on an aspect of ego which is not very often discussed, and that's the understatement of ego. Mostly when we think of egotism, we think of somebody who thinks too much of himself, whereas egotism also includes somebody who thinks too little of herself. And what I come across when I'm encouraging my students to talk about this to others is that they don't feel ready. They don't feel they know enough. They think they have to know what they're talking about before they teach. Well, that's absurd. How can you know what you're talking about before you try and teach? Everybody assumes that you need to know and then teach. It's just wrong. You cannot know until you teach. The whole thing of knowing is an interplay. This is what we're talking about. So anyone who actually stands forward and says, okay, I'll be the one person that stands forward and tries to teach, is guaranteed to be attacked. There's no question about that. It's an act of great humility to stand forward, knowing you're going to be dragged down and knowing that nobody else will do the job. You know, so
you made me realize something I never had really fully grasped, that thinking too little of yourself, you're still thinking of yourself. You're still self-involved. And I think that's why we used to say we have our alphas, we have our betas, but the betas are always, you know, carping and trying to take down the alpha, you know, peck by peck. There's still a self-involvement that I didn't really fully grasp, even in that what could be thought of as modesty. There's still an egotism, or can be.
If it's dressed up as modesty, that's a version of the prideful behavior that they're indulging in. You know, this collective dumbing down of everyone so that nobody's going to put their head above the pack. That's called civilization. You know, all it does is move us down towards the lowest common denominator more and more and more. With the exception of people that are arrogant enough, like, you know, Donald Trump, for example, to say, no, and people I get voted into power, mainly because the others who voted him are actually undermining their own egos. So it's a very subtle point. Egotism is not what it seems to be. And if somebody actually knows of this mystery, they actually understand the mystery, and they nevertheless put themselves forward, knowing that they'll never be understood, knowing that they're going to be attacked, knowing that there's no final joy, that there's no way that you're going to get satisfaction, and the only way they'll actually make any noise is by beating their chests and being accused of arrogance. You know, if such a person is actually in your, you know, in your world, then decide whether that person is behaving in a way which is prideful or humble. And I think in Taurus 18 that question is raised, you know, which of us is the prideful one if we know what we're doing? It's a very subtle point, this, isn't it?
I came across an idea that I loved from the fairy community, where they talk about mental hygiene. And this woman with the bag and the air blowing through makes me think of this kind of purification of mental hygiene, especially with so much information and so much stimulation available. This pause and refreshment, expecting emptiness, is, I would really invite that into my unconsciousness.
Yeah, and it's the third of a set here. I mean, like we've talked about the expression of these three being related to the keyword awakening, and then we can see a theme developing here, can't we? You know, and the awakening is, first of all, attempting to teach what you know. Secondly, getting feedback and like processing that within. And then thirdly, understanding that the open mind, the Zen mind, is a greater wisdom. We have that. And the fourth degree of the expression is method. How do we do this? A newly formed continent. When the mind is open, then spirit can enter. Pure receptivity, sponsoring spiritual breakthrough, changing things takes power. A mind that is free of the constriction of staunch belief and moralistic attitudes is free to be spontaneous. Then it is responsive to unconscious upwellings of inspiration, creating new thoughts, out of which new realities can emerge and rise up.
Yeah, so without an empty bag, you can't be spontaneous.
Exactly, yeah.
it's also kind of fixed beliefs. You know, you think you've got it figured out and you know it, doesn't give space for new learning to come. You know, it says free of staunch belief. You know, so again, to me, that would be the interpretation of vain as I've got it figured out. There's nothing new for me to learn.
Yeah, but the explanation I gave just now was that somebody who has actually anything to say and can actually accumulate a student group cannot be so stupid as to think that they've got it worked out. But nevertheless, they need to say, look, this is the mystery, knowing full well that the mystery is that nobody knows the mystery.
Yeah.
And,
Or everybody knows the mystery.
or well,
Well, the
On
mystery
some
is
level.
evolving. It's always evolving. We're only getting closer or in the direction of, or, you know,
yeah.
kind
So
of.
I mean, the point is that somebody saying like this is the case is simply putting a thesis out into the world, knowing full well that it will need to be defended. That's what you do with your thesis, getting a master's degree. You know, you put your ideas out, knowing you're going to get kickback, and that will then move you towards the open-mindedness of 18 and the possibility of creative development of 19.
Yeah, and then the thing you talked about was the thesis and the antithesis, and then the third principle. So they're going to defend the thesis, but ultimately the true answer is not even the thesis or the antithesis. It's not the polarity.
The idea of an answer, it needs to be changed as well. You know, questions and answers need to be resolved differently. If you have a question and an answer, and then you still have a question and an answer tomorrow, then the answer didn't work. Because the answer is not the polarity of the question. It is that which dissolves the question. That's the empty-mindedness of number 18. It's dissolved the question so that something brand new, a brand new continent. It's not just a repair. You know, we're not improving Africa. We're creating something entirely new, a brand new continent. And that's yeah. And then in 20, wind, clouds, and haste, energies and beings from other realms expressing through our participation, spiritual forces, willing participation with unseen spiritual forces. The ego's exaltation lies in the depth of its stability during changes. Now we're going to hear from Linda.
No, not necessarily. I was just writing down what you were saying.
I was just being ironic or even facetious. Now, the point is that the idea that somebody who is a teacher is without ego is absurd. It just doesn't happen like that. It couldn't happen like that. We need
Nobody is.
exactly so. And what happens in Taurus 20 is that the winds blow, you know, opinions come and go. Like, for example, Ajay has just said, everyone knows the answer, you know, and that's a popular, I was saying nobody knows the mystery, and Ajay said everybody knows the mystery. That's a popular kind of way of approaching this, and I don't think that's fair. There are people that just don't understand. They're unconscious, and I think that a part of what we're doing with the New Age movement is saying everyone's equal, and it's just nonsense. We're not. No, we're not equal in any way. We're not equal in consciousness.
In Kabbalism, that highest level of soul is still in a connection with the Ein Sof. So it's still it can't incarnate unless it has some connection. Now, whether that's in consciousness, of course, you're absolutely right. But so it's the big yes, no. Yeah, I agree with you that, yeah, not everyone.
Some people know they are conscious, some people don't, they are unconscious. That's the division of the teaching in the sort of student role generally. And most of the students are actually better able to be teachers than they recognize, and for some reason they're not doing it. You know, that's the process all the way down. I mean, it's just like at any level, that's what happens. And that's why consciousness does not develop. What happens with Taurus 20 is that there's an awareness of that which is all knowledge that can blow through us if we're open to it, as long as we are not staunch and we are actually willing to be spontaneously creative. I think that's the mystery of Taurus 20.
Yeah, it's something that is incredibly hard to sort of, I guess, be confident about, you know, like what you were describing about being a teacher sort of goes back to sort of what we read about the president the other week. This thing of being criticized, and that has to do with sort of like this thing of what he was referring before about the staunch beliefs, you know. When we stand on what we believe, then like what you say, we have lots of people who can criticize it, but we need to have like a bull's thick skin or transparency to be able to sort of to deal with or the criticism or the total unconsciousness, you know, of what you're trying, you know, when you're talking, when you're sharing. And then if the people are not connected, then it's just the ball's back in your court, and what do you say? Well, let's all close shop and go home.
It's an interesting question whether you see Jesus as humble or not. Jesus being the exemplar of the teacher, was he a picture of humility or was he not? You know, do you have any opinions about that one?
Can he be both?
Can he
Humble
be both?
and not?
Yeah, at different times.
Yeah, and balance, and you're right.
Did he act as though he was both humble and whatever is the appropriate version?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
According to the stories, yeah.
Yeah. So what is humility then? Is it just a tool or is it the highest spiritual station?
Well, there's that Hasidic story about the 2 slips of paper for your pockets. And one is, I'm nothing but dust. And the other is, the entire creation was created for me. I like that story.
So what is the polarity of humility in that story?
I think it's willing to be taught and to be
Well, that's humility, isn't it? What's the polarity of the word humility in this context?
Well, you used the word arrogance at the beginning. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's what you use.
Well, that's not likely to be the quality that Jesus was bringing to the matter. Well,
Yeah,
I think it's majesty. Your birthright of majesty as a unique creation.
Majesty is good. Yeah.
will also.
Say that again, please, Linda. Did you say will?
Willfulness, kind of like, you know, he had a powerful will at the same time. Like he had a strong, you know, boundary or no, you know, he was very autonomous. I don't know.
Any other ideas? What would be a polarity to the word humility? How strange that we don't know.
We don't have good language for it.
We don't have a lot of room.
Pride is what comes up. So it's kind of the balance between, you know, too much humility, too much pride, right? It's, I don't know.
Do you consider pride a positive quality?
It can be. It's about the balance again.
Can we distinguish between the word pride meaning the positive aspect and pride meaning the negative aspect? Often associated with the word arrogant. Is there a word pride which replaces the word pride that is not meaning arrogant?
Yeah, I think that you can feel like, you've worked hard and you've overcome things and you've grown and you've developed insight, and you can feel a sense of pride at where you've come.
I'm asking for a single word.
Nobility,
Nobility,
Integrity.
sovereignty.
sovereignty, integrity. Integrity is not the opposite of humility, is it?
No.
No.
Deceit is the opposite of integrity or something. Yeah, but nobility, majesty. What was the third word you came up with, Ajay?
Sovereignty.
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 Yeah.
Sovereignty has
It's a
been on my
compound
mind a
word.
lot lately.
Self-esteem, it would be
Self-
kind of.
Self-esteem. Yeah, it's a necessary quality. Is that full enough? Self-esteem does not have to be something about. I like majesty very much, for example, and nobility, because there's something about, look, I'm the leader. I'm in command of a situation. There's that going on, which self-esteem does not necessarily imply, but majesty does. A king is, or a queen is, out there. Loic, are you voting for a?
I wanted to say something because I wanted to know what humility means to you guys. For me, humility is taking up no more than your right place in the cosmic plane. I think that I learned the Hebrew word for humility is anava, which depending on who's interpreting the word, means occupying your God-given space. For me, it's just the opposite of that would be someone who's suffocating the space. And humility is really making sure that you are filling your right place, the right space.
What about underfilling your space? What would that be?
Crying shame.
Yeah, I mean, is it more humble to take less space than you're due?
No, it's the balance. It's the point being
Well,
always
less
balance.
space, I guess, is going back to what you said earlier about thinking little value of yourself, or still being in that ego position. I think is just knowing your true value is taking less value, taking less space that you should take as your right space, is being in your humility.
So taking less space than you deserve is humility, is it?
No.
No, well, that's not what you're saying.
No, it's not.
Sabine, have you have something to say?
Yeah, I was checking as a linguist, I was checking the definition in French of humility. And so it comes from the Latin, where humilitas, which means small size. So maybe humility is just to use enough space and no more space, or that we all need, something like that.
What Loic said, you agree with Loic? The Hebrew understanding of the word is the same, yeah. Okay, so somebody who's taking less space than they need, they're not being humble, they're being
just the
martyring.
space, yeah.
Okay, so somebody who's taking less than they need, are they being better or worse? Are they being self-denying?
They're kind of shirking their responsibility
They're
at that point.
shirking. That's lovely.
Why is that funny?
I agree with it. I agree with it. I think that ties in with what we're talking.
They're shrinking, right? They're here for a purpose and they're not fulfilling their mission.
Yes, indeed. And they need a little bit more of what to move forward into that.
Ego.
Arrogance.
Possibly. What was your word, Loic?
Linda pointed out arrogance, and I think this is, I like that word. I have a shadow of arrogance myself.
Arrogance. That's great. I looked at the linguistic definition of arrogance, and rogare is Latin for rulership. So arrogance is going against the rulership, is having no ruler apart from yourself. Self-determination.
But you know, like I think about human development, we have to develop our egos. We have to start there, and we have to develop a strong ego before that we can then, you know, as we transition into a spiritual development, we have to, you know, but the ego has to be developed first before we can start to let it go.
So then the question becomes, with regard to humility, is humility a practice, a discipline, a gift, a spiritual station? I mean, where would you describe humility in all of that?
Well, it's a practice that's necessary. I guess to be able to receive from others, like in any type of relationship, or being able to receive, in relation to being able to receive. To be able to receive allows you then to be able to give.
Balancing giving and receiving.
Let's look at that. You reckon it's a practice. So somebody behaves as if they are humble, but actually the truth is they think really, really highly of themselves, you know. Well, what about that?
No, I think it's more like the definition that Loic brought, you know, that just sort of knowing you.
But that's not what I asked. What I'm saying is that I know people who pretend to be humble because it's a spiritual practice, and they're not. The truth is that they're not. So is that good or bad? They're practicing humility, but they're not humble people.
No, that's not good.
It has to be an internal.
So what should they do instead of practicing humility if they're actually not humble people?
I think it's a self-awareness, like a self-reflection.
Well, is that answering my question? They should reflect more upon themselves. Is that what you mean?
They should surround themselves with people who are humble, but would they be able to recognize
That's great. Exactly so, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so that you can pick it up by osmosis, you can catch it. Yeah. In fact, I think that it's only really possible to be humble in the presence of a humble person, personally. But that's not the major point I'm making. Okay, so we've looked at the 5 degrees of Taurus. Are we happy with the expression of awakening? Can we see that Taurus has that aspect of its being? It's not much celebrated as such, is it? You know, you don't think of Taurus as being the awakener of the zodiac. You know, you'd think of others a lot sooner than you'd think of Taurus. I think Taurus has authority as well, which is not much talked of.
Yeah, that's the next word.
Yeah, sure. And that comes from this this awakening, this understanding of, you know, I mean, let's get back to the example we have in our group. Me, I'm in this expression. I'm the 16th degree of Taurus, and one of the things that I kind of own as mine, which might distinguish me from other people, is that I'm very kind of unhappy with what most of the world considers to be spirituality. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I realize that, but I despair when people just take the shortcut and think that they understand what spirituality is because they've read it in a book somewhere and they don't check it out. For example, quite a lot of the teachings that we've been given over the centuries are politically motivated. You know, quite a lot of them are simply wrong. They're mistaken. You know, so the actual jewels of spirituality are not so easily found. And anyone who hasn't looked really in the nth degree, they're not going to know them. And so, this is actually a description of most people that you'll meet. Most people have not got any interest in getting to the heart of the matter, getting to the depth of knowledge of spirituality. And there is something about Taurus that just cannot accept insincerity. Taurus is what it is. You can like me, you can not like me, I don't care, I'm like this. That's a kind of Taurus attitude to life. And I don't know whether that's true of any of the other zodiac signs at all, not to this extent. I am what I am. It's really earthy and stubbornly fixed, and I think that degree of pursuit of knowledge is actually celebrated by Buddha, for example. Do you know Buddha was said to be, he was enlightened on Wesak. The Wesak is a celebration of the enlightenment of Buddha, which is the full moon the midpoint between two full moons. Every 19 years, there are two full moons in Taurus, and they celebrate the full moon in Taurus as Buddha's day. And once every 19 years, they celebrate a month of it because of that phenomenon. And Buddha represents the Taurus principle of sitting quietly, doing nothing for a very long time under a tree outdoors. It's really lovely, right, I'm going to stay here until I'm enlightened. I'm not moving, I'm not going anywhere, And he was vastly rich at the beginning of his life and totally poor for a section of it, before he actually decided to sit under a tree. It's really Taurus-like,
How do you spell that word? The celebration.
Wesak. And of course, Taurus, Buddha put the word awakening into consciousness, didn't he, really? The whole idea of awakening and realization and enlightenment, that's mainly from Buddhism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very interesting.
So a bull can become awakened and can be satisfied with being awakened, and hopefully have patience and compassion for all of the others while he's teaching, so that other people can also become awakened and then but be satisfied.
Yeah, I think that's right, but there is one sort of thing never ever discussed, and it should be discussed, is that whoever is a teacher, and we're including Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, John Lennon, Jesus Christ, they're all attacked. And the Buddha was not going to be free from that. I mean, he was engendering a lot of resistance because he was telling the Hindus, look, these untouchables are good people, they're God's people. Let's change their name to Harijan or something, which means beloved of God or something like that. And he was very controversial, so inevitably attacked, and that's not written up anywhere, so for a teacher to survive those attacks, they need what you described as the hard shell of a Taurus, or the thick skin of a Taurus, and that's not only true for Taurus, that's true for any teacher. You need that thick skin, you need that boundary to be clear and in place, and that needs to be firm and strong, and requires a very well balanced self-love to be able to do that. And then within that, you can practice humility as a spiritual practice to reach the higher states. But you can't surrender to that. You'd be trashed. The world is a dangerous place, and we don't discuss that very much. The teachers that we put out as our heroes, they have strong boundaries typically, and if they loosen those boundaries, they get killed. John F. Kennedy was foolish. John Lennon was foolish. Mahatma Gandhi missed all the warnings, and they were capable of avoiding assassination, all of them, you know, and they just allowed it in. So that's an interesting aspect of teaching. You're going to be attacked, and you need to defend against that.
It's interesting too that the Buddha was actually royalty. So he entered his spiritual search already with his majesty intact, not humbly, you know, not a humble monk. It's just
Sure,
interesting.
he didn't have to learn it, did he? He had it gifted to him.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us have to learn that quality of majesty. It's quite hard. I mean, you know, if you're born an aristocrat, you don't think twice about it. But for those of us in the lower ranks, it's quite difficult to take a commanding position in life. You know,
Right.
not been trained for the job.